Rabotai, welcome back to Dalat Amot shel Halacha. Ein lo lakadosh baruch hu be'olama ela arba amot shel Halacha bilvad. Guys, we are in the 9 days in the month of Av. That's why we're not listening to real music. We're listening to a cappella. Before we do begin, a lot of us unfortunately weakened, softened when it came to learn Torah in the summer. A lot of people fell off from learning real Torah in the summer. And it's very sad, Rabotai, it's very sad. 10 months we know Hashem, and the last 2 months we don't know Hashem. Next month, it's already Elul. What are you going to tell Hashem? Rabotai, we got to strengthen ourselves in tefillah, in Torah, in mitzvot, in midot. Okay, as you guys can see, you guys do have a screen in front of you. We're going to be doing the Mishnah Berurah. A lot of the things, as we'll go along, I will explain to you that I added it in order to just know the Halacha L'Maaseh also. As we're going to go through this, we're going to see also in English after, okay? We're going to see the Hebrew and the English. Again, remember one thing when it comes to learning Torah. Learning Torah, not only just listening, but you also have to see it. Like was mentioned previously, otiyot umachkimiyot, the letters of the Torah make you smart. So it's very important not to only listen, but to also hear. Even better, if you could even read it. This is why we're actually putting everything on the screen. Now you need to understand, a lot of times when it comes to Torah and mitzvot, a lot of times you see people that they try to go ahead and they try to cut corners. When it comes to Torah, you never cut corners. And whatever is going to make you be able to learn Torah better, that's what you do. Even if it's longer, even if you have to repeat it 101 times, whatever it is, you don't cut corners when it comes to Torah. You want to cut corners in building your house, you could do that. You want to cut corners in the way you want to drive your car with 3 wheels, you could do that. You could do whatever you want, but that's not going to last. But when it comes to Torah, somehow we're fine with it. Anyway, Rabotai, we got to try to go ahead and make sure that we learn Torah the best possible way. And Baruch Hashem, we have this opportunity to be able to learn it through the screen, which I am very excited for. As you guys can see on the screen, on the top of the screen, as we go along, I'm going to highlight it. We are beginning, Rabotai, we are in Dalat Amot shel Halacha, Siman 271, Halacha 1. That's Siman Reish Ayin Aleph, Halacha Aleph. We're going to do the Mishnah Berurah today, Siv Katan Bet. Be'ezrat Hashem, we'll try to finish the whole thing. Today's class will be part 2. Okay, so let's get to work. Here we go. Now, we started the Halacha in Siman Reish Ayin Aleph and Halacha Aleph. We started saying in the Halacha, K'sheyavo lebeito yimaher le'echol miyad. We started stating that when a person comes home from the synagogue, he should be quick to eat immediately. So if you pay close attention, this word miyad right over here, let me just highlight this word miyad. This word miyad comes from the Shulchan Aruch itself, right? Because the Shulchan Aruch says, so that word miyad comes directly from it. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to try to see what the Mishnah Berurah has to say on this. The Mishnah Berurah begins. Even though the Halacha tells us that when you come home you have to begin immediately, continues the Mishnah Berurah and he says, and nevertheless, from the more correct practice, likrot kri shema mikodem im misapek shebebeit knesset lo kara'ah bezmanam. From the more correct thing to do is to go ahead and read Kriya Shema prior to beginning your meal if you have a doubt if you recited the Kriya Shema in the Beit Knesset at its proper time. Now, a lot of us, especially in the summer, we go to the synagogue at 7 o'clock. House of Torah, Baruch Hashem, the rabbi, the Marad Atar of Yosef Chiyah Shlita, made it 6:50 only for people to be able to get home earlier so they can spend more time with their children. Because especially if you have also elders in the house, a lot of them want to go to sleep. A lot of them get tired quick. So therefore, a lot of synagogues, some even begin 6:30. But the point is, when you're beginning that early and you're saying Kriya Shema in Aravit, you're not really fulfilling the mitzvah from the Torah according to the Halacha, the way we want you to fulfill it. Because we want you to say Kriya Shema after the 3 stars come out. But we know, let's say if you started davening mincha at 6:50, or even at 7 o'clock, and you're starting Aravit at 7:30, sunset is not until at least 8:30, somewhere there. So you're way behind the time. So, but nevertheless, you went ahead and you davened Aravit. Comes the Mishnah Berurah tells us that even though that there is a mitzvah that when you come home from the synagogue, you should begin your meal immediately, nevertheless, the correct practice would be that you should recite the Kriya Shema prior to beginning your meal. Now, when does this apply? That is specifically if you have a doubt if you recited the Kriya Shema in this proper time. Now, what happens if this would have been during the winter where everybody starts on time, right? Because the winter is very short. So let's say if you started the prayer at 5 o'clock, let's say Mincha prayer started at 5 o'clock, and Shki is at 5:30, and you're saying Shema at 6 o'clock, you don't have this problem. So that's what the Mishnah Berurah is telling us over here, that we're only speaking about a situation where you recited the Kriya Shema and you were not sure if you fulfilled the mitzvah the best possible way after when the 3 stars came out. Since you don't have that, since you don't know it, we're going to tell you, go ahead and recite the Kriya Shema before you begin doing kiddush. So let's do that one more time. And nevertheless, it is correct to recite Kriya Shema prior to doing kiddush. If you have a doubt, that in the Beit HaKnesset you did not recite the Kriya Shema in its proper time, meaning after when the 3 stars came out. He says, the Mishnah Berurah tells us, look above in Siman Reish Samach Zayin, in the Mishnah Berurah Siv Katan Vav. Now we're not going to go through that all. There's a lot to cover, Rabotai. But we're going to see what Rabbi Dahan has to say on this. By the way, we're still going to do Rabbi Dahan, but I'm just going to put it over here in short. So now this part is not part of the Mishnah Berurah. So I took this from Rabbi Dahan's book. Ha'ikar lahalacha. The main halacha is going to be Shemutar likadesh v'lechol mi'be'od yom kodem kriyat shema. That it is permissible for one to go ahead and do kiddush and eat even when it is still day outside, prior to saying Kriya Shema. Now, Rabotai, if you want to go ahead and say Kriya Shema to fulfill all opinions, how beautiful, how praiseworthy is that going to be? But, halachically speaking, you are allowed to go ahead and do the kiddush and say Kriya Shema. Before we begin the next piece, I want to share with you Rabbi Dahan what he has to say. Rabbi Dahan in Amudei Horo'ah says, in Od Aleph, he brings a Mishnah Berurah Sivkat in bed, where he says, Lo kar'a bezmanha. He says over here, V'kvar he'erachnu bezeh b'siman Reish Samach Zayin Amudei Horo'ah Od Hei. We already elaborated on this in Siman Reish Samach Zayin in the Amudei Horo'ah in Od Hei. V'chen hivanu b'samach be'od bet b'kitzur v'en kan makom la'arich. And I also brought down the language in short, and this is not the place to lengthen on it. So he says like this, in Od Bet, Umihu ha'ikar lahalacha. The halacha l'maseh is going to be, Shemutar lekadesh ulechol mi'be'od yom. You're allowed to do kiddush and you're allowed to begin to eat while it's still day outside. She'anu sumuchin lahalacha. Because we hold halachically, shetosevet mechol ala kodesh hu min Torah, that when it comes to adding from the weekday onto the kadosh, onto the holy day, we hold that the tosefet, that tosefet that you have to add to begin Shabbat a little bit earlier, we learn that it's from the Torah. So therefore you're allowed to go ahead and do kiddush and eat even prior to saying Kriyat Shema. Continues Rabbi Dahan Shlita, and he says, Va'afilu l'svarat ha'omerim, even according to the opinions that say, Shetosefet Shabbat hi midivrei sofrim, that tosefet, that this what we add, the addition from the weekday onto the Shabbat, onto the holy day, is from the rabbis. Nevertheless, yesh l'smoch al dat ha-Mordechai, you're able to rely on the opinion of the Mordechai. The Shaper Yatzah, that it's good that a person comes out in the obligation of the Kriyat Shema, Mishum dizman memela ka'ati, because the time of Shabbat comes by itself. Umutar latchil lechol afilu samach letzet kochavim, and it's permissible for one to begin and eat even close to when the 3 stars come out. The le'inyan achil kodem Kriyat Shema, when it comes in regards to eating prior to saying Kriyat Shema, samchinan, we rely al data poskim, on the opinion of the rabbis. Sheyatza b'kriyat Beit HaKnesset, you fulfilled your obligation in reciting the Kriyat Shema in the Beit HaKnesset, even though it was before the stars came out. You have opinions that say you do fulfill your obligation. Nevertheless, Rabotai, we see from over here, you are allowed to go ahead and begin the kiddush, and you're allowed to go ahead and eat. But remember that there are other opinions that hold you shouldn't begin and eat until you do Shema. Again, the more correct thing to do, like the Mishnah Berurah said, is to say Shema. You don't want to say, no problem. But one thing I will warn is that when you do begin eating and when the time of the Kriyat Shema comes, let's say when the stars come out, make sure to go ahead and fulfill the mitzvah of the Kriyat Shema. Why? A lot of times when you're eating your food, you say Birkat Hamazon, you get tired, you go to sleep, and you forgot to go ahead and say the Kriyat Shema. So therefore, once the stars come out, make some kind of reminder, or ask your wife, or do something in the house, maybe put a cup in front of you or something, to remind you that you have the obligation to say Kriyat Shema after the stars come out. Fine. Now that we did this, now we're going to go back into the screen and we're going to see another point. Rabotai, I honestly hope we'll be able to get this whole Mishnah Berurah inside, not because I don't want to. It's time consuming, meaning that there's so much to do, Baruch Hashem, in one day, and not everything you can squeeze in. So as much as I can do, I'm going to do it now. I know I want to try to do the whole thing, but because it's always better to get the whole topic at hand at one time. Fine. Okay, Bezrat Hashem, let's see what is going to happen. It's just, it's 3:44 now. Let's see what happens. Okay. Next point. Katav Rambam, Perik Chavtet Mehilchot Shabbat Mitzvat Aseh Min HaTorah Likadesh Et Hayom HaShabbat B'Devarim. Rabotai, listen to this very carefully. The Rambam writes in chapter 29 from the Halachot of Shabbat that it is a positive commandment from the Torah to sanctify the day of Shabbat with words. Now, I'm not speaking about right now if you're doing it on a cup of wine, no. To sanctify the day of Shabbat with words. Shenamar, like the pasuk says, Michela, guys, I do apologize. Let me just highlight it so we can be on the same point. All right, so let's do that one more time. The Rambam writes in chapter 29, Halachot Shabbat, that there is a positive commandment from the Torah to sanctify the day of Shabbat with words. Shenamar, like the pasuk states, Zachor et Yom HaShabbat likadsho. Remember the day to sanctify it. How do you sanctify Shabbat? Koloimar, meaning to say, Zachrechu zichirat Shabbat v'kiddush. Now just give me 1 sec. I think there might be a mistake over here. V'chulu. Yes, I think it is a mistake. Give me 1 sec. Let me see into the Mishnah Berurah. Yes, I made a mistake. No. All right, just let me make this correction. 1 second, guys. Bear with me. See that? Beautiful. Here we go. 1. Shall just let me get to the... There we go. Alright, so I changed from Zechirat Shabbat, it has to be Zechirat Shevach, okay? So let's go back, Rabotai. One of the things beautiful with this computer is you could erase and you don't have to write everything down, you could even save it like this. Okay. Like the Pasuk says, like the Pasuk says, you should remember the day of Shabbat and sanctify it. Kolomar, meaning to say, Zechrecho Zechirat Shevach v'kiddush v'chulo. You should remember by mentioning Hashem's praises and the sanctification and etc. So that's why it was important for me to change it from Shabbat to Shevach. Umedivri Sofrim, here we go, I highlighted this point. Umedivri Sofrim shetiyeh zechira zo al kos shel yain. This mentioning, this remembering and sanctifying Shabbat, this that we say, which has to be done with words, is from the Torah. But these words, which has to be from the Torah, should be done on a cup of wine. This is from the rabbis. So that's what he says right over here in the Mishnah Berurah. Umedivri Sofrim, shetiyeh zechira zo al kos shel yain. From the rabbis, Sofrim are rabbis. From the rabbis, this zechira, this mentioning, this remembering of the Shabbat should be on the cup of wine. Who else holds like that? V'chein katav HaTosfot b'Sukkah. So too the Tosfot wrote in Masechet Sukkah, in Daf Lamed Chet, u'benazir Daf Daled. Daf Lamed Chet, u'benazir Daf Daled. Fine. The ala yain hu rag midraban. This that we do the kiddush and the wine is only from the rabbis. The words that are coming out of your mouth, that is from the Torah. Sanctifying Shabbat with praises and sanctification, that is from the Torah. But to do it on a cup of wine, that is only from the rabbis. Okay, like we see right over here. V'katav Magen Avraham, and the Magen Avraham wrote, the lefize according to this, Medoraita b'kiddush shomer b'tefila sagi. From the Torah, the kiddush, the sanctification that you say in the Shemona Esrei, it's enough. Now, Rabotai, what is that sanctification? What is that kiddush that we do in the prayer? So, Rabotai, let me just put it to you like this. Again, I didn't put it on the screen. You know, at least not everything has to be seen, but when we begin the Shemona Esrei, right? When we begin the Tefillah Shabbat, the 7th prayer on Friday night, after we conclude the blessing of Baruch Ata Hashem Hakel HaKadosh, let's see if you guys are going to be able to see it. Yeah, right over here. Then we begin Ata Kiddashta. Now, but where does the mention, where do the praises for Shabbat come? That the Magen Avraham is telling us that that's from the Torah, and at the cup of wine it's only from the rabbis. Here we go. When you begin saying Vayechulu Hashamayim va'aretz, yes, you guys see right over here. Then you have Yismechu b'malchutach, and then you say, no, that's it. That's it. Yeah, there's something else, and then we conclude Baruch Ata Hashem Mikadesh Shabbat. But this is the zechira right over here. Vayechulu Hashamayim va'aretz. This is the zechira and the Yismechu b'malchutach, and then we conclude the blessing with Baruch Ata Hashem Mikadesh HaShabbat. Now the Magen Avraham tells us that to sanctify Shabbat itself has to be done with words, and by you doing the sanctification in the Shemona Esrei prayer, like I just showed you, you fulfill your obligation of the Torah. That's what Magen Avraham tells us over here. V'katav Magen Avraham, and the Magen Avraham wrote, "The lefize mideoraita b'kiddush shomer b'tefila sagi." According to this, that if we want to learn that the kiddush is from the Torah, but doing the kiddush on the cup of wine is only from the rabbis, so by you doing kiddush that you say during the Shemona Esrei, that in itself is enough. Dikra kiti, because it's written in the verse, Zachoret et Yom HaShabbat, The pasuk says that remember the day of Shabbat. Good. V'harei zacharoto. Good. And you mentioned and you remembered it. That's it. That's all the pasuk says. So therefore, the Magen Avraham tells it that the zechir that one, if the whole zechir, if all you have to do is remember Shabbat through words, good. So by me saying it in the Shemoneh Esrei, I fulfill my obligation from the Torah, and that would be enough. Because the pasuk says zechor et yom Shabbat, remember the day of Shabbat, good, and you did remember it by speaking about it. Now the only problem is, we know that when it comes to kiddush, again, we understand kiddush right now. When I say kiddush, you're understanding kiddush to mean on a kos shel yain, on a cup of wine, which is normal. But right now we understand that kiddush is one thing. Kiddush is from the Torah, the sanctification, the praising of Hashem is from the Torah. Then you have another thing, which is the cup of wine. So two different things. But we know that the Halacha in the Shulchan Aruch states, Ein kiddush ele b'makom seuda. You could only do kiddush, this praising, sanctifying Shabbat, only in the place where you're going to have the meal. And now that we know that the kiddush has to be done on a cup of wine, so the Mishnah is basically telling us, how can the Magen Avraham tell me that I fulfill my obligation in the prayer? It has to be in the place of the meal. I'm not in the place of the meal. I'm not planning to eat in the shul. I have to go home and eat. So that's what the next line, again, you have to know this, but that's what the next line the Mishnah tells us. He just tells us, look, v'kiddush b'makom seuda midrabanan. When you speak about doing the kiddush in the place of the meal, that's only from the rabbis. So to do the kiddush, you fulfill your obligation in the Shemoneh Esrei prayer of Aravit. That's from the Torah. That's enough for you to fulfill your obligation. But what about doing it with the meal? No. Kiddush b'makom seuda, that's also from the rabbis. So really, it's not a problem. כמו שכתב בית יוסף בסימן רס"ט והביא המגן אברהם ראיה לזה מן הגימור דיוצא מן התורה בתפילה. Like the Beit Yosef writes in Siman Reish Samachet, and the Magen Avraham brought a proof from the Gemara that a person fulfills his obligation when it comes to kiddush, not on the cup of wine. When I say kiddush, I mean the sanctifying the day of Shabbat with words, without the cup of wine. That he does fulfill his obligation of the Torah in the prayer, right over here. Okay. Alken, therefore, Rabotai, now we're going to see the next piece. Alken, im safek lo im kiddush o lo. Therefore, if a person has a doubt if he did kiddush or not, ein tzarich lachzor v'lekadesh. You don't have to go back and you don't have to do kiddush. This feka de rabban lekula prima gadim. He brings us down the name of the prima gadim that since you have a doubt and it's only from the rabbi, should you go and bless on the cup of wine? We're going to tell you to be lenient and not to bless. Comes out over here, Rabotai. The Mishnah is telling us that if a person has a doubt, you went ahead, you davened Aravit. You said Vayichilu, you did the Aravit shel Shabbat, the prayer of the Shemoneh Esrei, the Tefillah Sheva. You said Vayichilu Yismuchu b'malchutach, etc. You said Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh HaShabbat. You come home, whatever it is, let's say your family's away, or whatever the situation was, you don't remember if you did kiddush on the cup of wine or not. You don't remember. Since the Magen Avraham told us that I fulfilled my obligation in the Shemoneh Esrei, because the kiddush is really with words, not on the cup of wine. And on the cup of wine, it's only from the rabbi, it's good. Comes the Mishnah tells us, if you have a doubt if you do the kiddush or not, don't do the kiddush. Because you're ready to fulfill your obligation in the Shemoneh Esrei of the evening prayer. If you see over here, I wrote over here in blue, Aval yesh derech acheret. One second, let me make this. Aval yesh derech acheret, ech la'asot zeh. Let's see this. Okay. See, I wrote over here, Aval yesh derech acheret in the blue, Aval yesh derech acheret, ech la'asot zeh. However, there is another way how to go around the situation. A person who does not remember, or he has a doubt if he did kiddush or not, the Mishnah tells you Safek Derabban Lekula, which means to say whenever something's Derabban and we require you to bless, since all the blessings are from the rabbis except Birkat Hamazon, we're going to tell you that since you have a doubt, when it comes to doubt, and since it's only rabbinic law, we're going to tell you not to bless. However, Rav Dahan Shlita brings down in the Sefer in Amodei Hora'ah how to go around the situation. So I'm looking in the Ot Gimel right now in Amodei Hora'ah. Rise the Mishnah, rise the Amodei Hora'ah, rise Rav Dahan Shlita. V'lamaaseh katav Mishnah Berurah. Halachically speaking, the Mishnah Berurah wrote, "B'kiyotze bazel lekam," similar to this later on, in Siv Katan Lametet. V'chen katav Ben Ishchai Shana Bet Bereshit Halacha Yutet. That what should one do? Sheyomar nusach hakiddush below shem u'malchut. You should go ahead and you should say the text of the kiddush without Hashem's name and His kingship. Ho'il why? Ho'il v'yesh omrim shechayav b'kiddush min haTorah. Since you have rabbis that learn that the obligation that one is obligated in the kiddush from the Torah, and you don't fulfill your obligation in the tefillah, it really has to be done on a cup of wine. So therefore they're going to tell you, go ahead, say the nusach of the kiddush without Hashem's name and His kingship. That means after you sing Shalom Aleichem, or if you're ready to, let's say, in Eshel Cham, I'm just telling you where it could be found in the Siddur. We have over there Yom HaShishi. You're going to say Yom HaShishi v'yichul Shamayim, that you can say it's a praise, etc. You're not going to say the blessing of Borei Pri HaGefen, because maybe you already did Kiddush. Maybe you already drank the wine. How do you know? But you're going to say the Kiddush without Hashem's name and His kingship according to the Ben Ishchai. How are you going to say it? Instead of saying Baruch Ata Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kiddishanu b'mitzvotav v'retzah banu, but you're going to say is Baruch Ata. Okay, so Baruch you're going to say out loud. Ata Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, you're going to say quietly, meaning in your mind. You're going to think it. Not you're going to say it with your mouth. You're going to think it. So how's the bracha going to go? If I were to do it right now, I would read it like this. Baruch Asher kiddishanu b'mitzvotav v'retzah banu v'shabbat kodosho b'ahava u'retzon hinechalanu zikaro l'maseh bereshit tichila l'mikrei kodesh zecher l'tzei Mitzrayim v'shabbat kodoshecha b'ahava u'retzon hinechaltanu Baruch mekadesh haShabbat. That's how I would do it. I'm taking away Hashem's name and His kingship. Yes, guys, you guys see what I just did? Remember, when I'm saying Baruch, I'm not just skipping Ata Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. I'm not skipping that. In my mind, I'm thinking about it, but I'm not saying it. So that is the opinion of the Ben Ishchai. That's what he tells over here. You should say the kiddush, the text of the kiddush without Hashem's name and His kingship. Since there are those that say that you are obligated in kiddush from the Torah, and you don't fulfill your obligation in the prayer. That's why we want you to go ahead and say the nusach inside, without Hashem's name and His kingship. And the opinion of Chacham Ovadia, in this, even if you want to tell me right now that with this for sure he does not fulfill his obligation in kiddush, so let me read that one more time. Even if you want to tell me that for sure you don't fulfill, let's go like those opinions that say that you don't fulfill your obligation from the Torah with kiddush in the Shemona Esrei prayer of Aravit. Nevertheless, since you have a doubt if you did the kiddush on the cup of wine or not, he said, good, don't say the kiddush with Hashem's name and His kingship, just like the Ben Ishchai said. But rather he tells you, just say this, look. So you're going to say the whole, right? Okay, let's just do this. If you guys are using the siddur, right, we're going to go back straight to this. Rather, you're only going to say Vayichulu Shamayim. All right, let's read it together, okay? You're going to say Vayichulu Shamayim va'aretz v'chol tzava'am Vayichal Elohim bayom hashvi'i malachto asher asa Vayishbot bayom hashvi'i mikol malachto asher asa Vayivarech Elohim et yom hashvi'i vayikadesh oto kivo shava mikol malachto asher bara Elohim la'asot. That's the one paragraph you're going to say. Continues Chacham Ovadia. After you said Vayichulu, then you're going to go and you're going to say Upasukim Vishamru. Then you're going to go and you're going to say the psukim of Vishamru b'dei Zohet HaShaval Tzot Et HaShaval L'Dorotam B'rit Olam B'ni U'V'nim b'dei Zoti L'Olam Ki Shesh Et Yam Me'asa Amonai Et HaShaval V'Ta'aretz U'Vayom HaShish Shvat V'Nafash. Afterwards comes Chacham Avad and he tells you, after you did that, then he tells you, you're going to go and you're going to say ואחר כך יאמר ישמחו במלכותך שומרי שבת וקרא עונג והשביר רצית בו ויקדש זך למעשה בראשית וזך ליציאת מצרים. Then you're going to go and you're going to say this basically right over here. ישמחו במלכותך שומרי שבת וקרא עונג ים מקדש כולם יסבו ותענגו מטווח והשביר רצית בו ויקדש עמדת יום מאותו קראת לזך למעשה בראשית. Basically, you're going to say this right here, ישמחו. This is in the Shemona Esrei. This is what Chacham Avad is telling us right over here. You know, let me make something clear. Okay. Let me make something clear. Because in the Siddur it says, Zecher lema'aseh bereshit. Alright, let's make this clear. In the Siddur over here it says, Zecher lema'aseh bereshit. But over here, Chacham Avad concludes, he says, you should say, Zecher lema'aseh. No. He says, Zecher l'tziat Mitzrayim. So let me do this slow. Let me just see something. Let me just see. Yismuchu b'malchotach shomrei Shabbat v'korei oneg. Okay. Ve'ashiv'i ratzita bo v'kidashta zeche. Okay, so he skips that also. Zeche l'maaseh bereshit v'zeche l'tzei Mitzrayim. Okay. All right, Rabotai, just give me 1 second. Let me just get a highlighter. So we'll make this. We can actually see this inside. Okay. Alright, Rabotai. So after you're going to say Vayichul Shamaim, and then after you're going to say Vishamru B'nei Yisrael, those pasukim, then you're going to say, if you guys can see in the purple, right? If you guys can see, we have over here, Yismechu b'malchutach Shomrei Shabbat v'korei oneg. Skip the rest. Go to Hashivi Ratzita bo v'kidashta. Skip the other line. Zecher l'maaseh bereshit, and then he adds over here, you should also say v'zecher l'tziat Mitzrayim. Okay? So that's what Chacham Ovadia wants you to go ahead and do in order to be able to come out of the doubt. Again, we're still going to the Mishnah Berurah, we're going to tell you don't have to go back and do the kiddush because everything is the Rabbanan, but there are ways that you should go around and you should do this way, either according to the Ben Ish Chai or either according to Chacham Ovadia. So one more time, let's read this one more time. Chacham Ovadia tells us, Mikol Makom, nevertheless, since you had a doubt if you did the kiddush on the cup of wine or not, you should not say the kiddush with Hashem's name and His kingship. Rather, you're going to say the pasukim, the verse of Vayechulu, and also you're going to say the verses of Vishamru. And afterwards you're going to say Yismechu b'malchotach shomrei Shabbat, like I just showed you in the Siddur. V'korei oneg v'ashvir ratzita bo v'kiddash zech l'maseh bereshit v'zech l'tziat Mitzrayim. Ki min haTorah inchiv lomar nusach hakiddush b'shem malchut. Because from the Torah, there's no obligation to go ahead and say the text of the kiddush with Hashem's name and His kingship. Harak la'askir kiddushat haShabbat b'divrei shevach. The only thing you do have to do is you only have to go ahead and you have to mention the sanctity of Shabbat with words of praise, like the Rambam said before. V'safek barachot hakel. Since you have a doubt if you said the bracha or not, we're going to tell you to go ahead and be lenient. Okay, so that is the opinion from Chacham Ovadia. However, comes Rabbi Dan and he says, Ve'im adayin lo hitpalel aravit. What happens if a person had a whole suffix, right? Some people they eat before, they eat before they daven aravit. So what happens if this person, he has a doubt if he said kiddush or not? He has a doubt, he doesn't remember. No problem, we're going to tell him there's another way. If you didn't, okay. If you did daven aravit, you're going to follow the Mishabur and the Ben Ish Chai, that you're going to say the kiddush without Hashem's name and His kingship, like I explained. Or like a Chamavadi, you're going to say Vayichulu, Vishamru, and Yismechu, etc. However, what happens if you still didn't daven aravit and you don't remember if you said the kiddush or not? He says, V'im adayin lo yitpalel aravit, yichaven b'tefilato. If you didn't daven aravit still, have kavanah in your prayer, letzet yedei chovat kiddush, to fulfill your obligation in the kiddush, ve'yomar b'tefillah, meaning in the vayichulu, right, in Yismechu over there, and you're going to say the tefillah right when you come towards the end. Zechel yitzeh mitzrayim achar zech lamaseh bereshit. This is brought down from Yalkut Yosef. He brings down over here. So in the Shemoneh Esrei itself, when you get to zech lamaseh bereshit, after you come over here, you're going to add over here the words zechel yitzeh mitzrayim. So you're going to say v'asher yitzeh bo v'kdash yamdat yom ota karat zech lamaseh bereshit zecher Litziat Mitzrayim. You're going to add those three words over there. So this way you went ahead and you fulfilled your obligation of Kiddush in the prayer. Okay. Alright, we do conclude with that. Baruch Hashem, fine. Let's go back into the Mishnah Berurah now. So this was what we just spoke about. Aval yesh derech acheret. However, there is another way. Last time we explained that according to the Mishnah Berurah and the Ben Ish Chai, you should skip out Hashem's name and His kingship. According to Chamawadia, you're also going to skip out Hashem's name and His kingship, but he says you should say Vayichulu Shamayim, Vishamru, and then you're going to say Yismechu. I want to see something. Okay. Trying to see something. Okay. Continues the Mishnah Berurah. Gam dekatan she'igi lechinuch yachol lehotzi lefi. According to this, that if we're saying right now that doing kiddush, according to the Mishnah Berurah, if doing kiddush is only from the rabbis, meaning when you're doing the kiddush on the cup of wine is only from the rabbis, but the kiddush itself is from the Torah, where you went ahead and you fulfilled your obligation according to the Magen Avraham in the Shemoneh Esrei. If you fulfilled your obligation in the Shemoneh Esrei of the Aravit prayer, so comes the Mishnah Berurah and he tells us now, Gam de katan she'igi lechinuch yachol leotzi lefi zeh afilu legadol b'kiddush. Also, a katan who reached the age of education is able to go ahead and take out the obligation of a person who's over 13 years of age, let's say his father or his older brother, in kiddush im hagadol hitpalal kvar. If the gadol, a person who's over 13, if he already davened, we're going to tell you that the katan is able to go ahead and fulfill his obligation. All right, Rabbi, say 1 second. Right over here, Rabbi. I want to show you something. Since we're saying that according to the Magen Avraham, Mina Torah, since from the Torah the Kiddush is really with words, so maybe you fulfilled your obligation in the Shemoneh Esrei of Aravit. If that is the case, when you're coming and you're doing Kiddush on a cup of wine, it comes out that it's only from the rabbis. Beautiful. If it's from the rabbis, so therefore I should be able to give my 6-year-old son to go ahead and do Kiddush for me. That's what the Mishnah Berurah is telling us right here. Gam di katan she'igi lechinu yachol leotzi lefi zeh afilu legadol shebi kiddush. Also, the katan that reached the age of chinuch is able to go ahead and fulfill the obligation of the gadol in kiddush if the gadol already prayed the Shemoneh Esrei in shul. That's the opinion of the Mishnah Berurah, even though he's going to retract, we'll see right now. But if you guys can see in red, I wrote over here. Halacha l'maseh, guys, we're not going to go, should I go to, let me see something over here, let me see if you brought it down. Okay, let me read it for you over here. Let me just tell you over here, and I'll read it over here. This is not in the Mishnah Berurah, but this is what we hold halacha. Aval katan lo yachol leotzi et gadol. Halachically, we're going to hold that a child under the age of 13 is not able to fulfill the obligation of the gadol. That he's not able to do. Let's see this in Amodei Hora'ah in Ot Daled. He says over here, the katan shigei v'chulu. Ulam data chazon Ovadia, however the opinion of Chacham Ovadia, she'avim ne'amar she'gadol yatsa min haTorah yedei chovat kiddush b'tifiluto. Even if you're going to say that the gadol, whenever I use the language gadol, the terminology gadol means an adult. An adult means certain years of age and up. Excuse me. She'avim ne'amar she'gadol yatsa min haTorah yedei chovat kiddush b'tifiluto. Even if you're going to say that the gadol fulfills obligation from the Torah by reciting the prayer of Aravit, afilu hachi, even in such a case, ena katan yachol leotzi yedei chovat kiddush ala yain. The katan is not able to go ahead and fulfill the gadol's kiddush for the cup of wine. She'en chiva mitzvot mutal al katan afilu midrabanan, because the obligation of mitzvot, they're not placed on the katan even from the rabbis. So why did the Chachamim place it on them? The main mitzvah of educating children is placed on the father. It's not that the rabbis placed an obligation on the child to do mitzvot. No, the rabbis never placed an obligation on the child to do mitzvot. The rabbis placed an obligation on the father to educate his children in mitzvot. But the child himself is part from all the mitzvot. So therefore the child is not even on the rabbinical level. So how do you want him to fulfill the gadol? That's why it comes to Hamavad, and he tells you that a katan is not able to go ahead and fulfill the obligation of a gadol, even though the gadol went there and he davened Shemona Esrei of Aravit. Doesn't matter. Even if you want to say he fulfills the obligation of kiddush from the Torah, so now he's on the rabbinical level for the kiddush, kosher kiddush. So let the son do it. You can't, because the son's not even on the rabbinical level, because there's no obligation of him doing mitzvot at all. This is when you say that the rabbis obligate him to do mitzvot. It's not placed on him. It's placed on the father to educate the son to go ahead and do mitzvot. That's one of the things as parents we have to be careful, and I hear this a lot of times. I can't tell my son this, I can't tell him everything today, Rabotai, you can't do anything. Rabotai, I want to educate you. Again, I'm not telling you to force your children, but you have to explain to your children the right path, the wrong path. You can't be quiet. The children are not going to know. You know what's educating them? The TV, YouTube, sport, TikTok, Instagram, everything else is educating them. So you got to be chacham. Number one, you have to be chacham. You have to be able to educate your son. Look, you're going to go on this path, it's going to lead you this way. You're going to go on this path, it's going to lead you this way. You got to educate them. You know, sometimes when you come out of shul, you have adults that smoke right after shul. I'm not judging, I'm just right after, a second after shul, 30, 40 guys, they gather next to the car, everybody's smoking, and there's like that's it, that's their life, you know, that's their ventilator system, I don't know. Rabotai, when you pass through these people, what do you say? What do you say? Okay, do it. You want to do it in your house, do it somewhere else. Don't do it in front of the shul. So when you see these things happen, whenever you see people acting the wrong way, you got to educate. Now again, you're not chas v'shalom judging these people. These people might have great desire to smoke. It's a very big thing that they kept themselves from smoking on Shabbat. But the point is, look at the other side. By them smoking and you're not pointing it out that it's wrong, children are going to think that it's right. So therefore you have to say, look, you see this? This is not right. This can kill, it's hazardous. It's a lot of chas v'shalom sicknesses come from it. People can get addictive. When you speak like that, and you show your children the option, you could go this way and look what ends up happening, or you're going to go this way and look what's going to end up happening. They see and they're able to make that decision. But you don't want the child tomorrow to come to you after, when he's already 20 or 30 years old, and he's going to say, Abba, why you never educated me? Why you never told me anything about the proper ways of life? You know, I was speaking to somebody today, I was speaking to a very, very big person, For me, Rabotai, it doesn't matter. You have no money, you have money. That makes, for me, I look at you the same way. Don't think just because you have money, the halacha is going to change for you. It's not going to change for you. So somebody told me something. He's like, Rabbi, maybe this should be omitted, maybe this should be omitted, maybe this should not be said, maybe this that should be. So you know what I said? I explained to him I said like this, let me ask you a question. If you want to omit this and that and this and that, so you want to make the people hear only what they want to hear. Let me ask you a question. What do you think is going to happen after 120 years of age? What do you think this person is going to do? I just want to know, just understand. You think he's going to come to Hashem and he's going to be happy? Or you think he's going to come to Hashem and he's going to blame you for all his mistakes because you never warned him? What do you think it's going to be? Say, well, I never thought of it like that. Why don't you think of it like that? Imagine if Chas v'Shalom Lo'olin Rabotai, a person is diagnosed Chas v'Shalom with a sickness and you have the cure. So what do? You say, listen, you're a good person. Hashem loves you. Unbelievable. What, you down? I'm so impressed with you. But you don't go ahead and you don't tell him that there's an antibiotic for his cure. What needs to really be done so he can be healed. He can be saved. You don't go and tell him that. What do you think is going to happen? The person is going to die eventually. Who's going to be to blame? You that didn't give him the antibiotics. But what happens if you do all that? Kol kavod, you're able to daven, this and that, but this sickness, if you're not going to take care of it, is going to eat you, it's going to kill you, chas v'shalom. There's a way it had to go around, there's a way how to beat it. This is the antibiotic, go ahead, take it. Tell me, is he going to be grateful to you? Of course he's going to be grateful to you. Same thing when it comes to Torah. People want to hide the truth of the Torah from other people. Because they want to make sure that they're loved in their eyes. Good, continue being loved in their eyes. Rabotai, when they find the truth, you're going to be hated in their eyes. Alright, so it's very important to know what is right and what is wrong. That's why you have to educate the children. There's a mitzvah of chinuch placed on the father to always educate the child. What's right, what's wrong, what's right, what's wrong. Okay? So let's continue. So that's how we conclude over here. Now, nevertheless, however, the Mishnah Berurah continues and he says, Nevertheless, he says, I have a lot of doubts, I have a lot of questions on this. Why? Because we hold halachically, halacha l'maaseh, Rabotai, Siman Samach Seif Dalet, in a Siman 60, halacha 4, the mitzvot tzrichot kavanah letzet b'asiyat mitzvah. Whenever you're doing any mitzvah, you have to have kavanah in fulfilling obligation that mitzvah, that you're doing it for the sake of the mitzvah, that you, Hashem, commanded me to do the mitzvah. You're not doing it for honor, you're not doing it for money, you're doing it because Hashem said so. But the problem is, but the problem is, in generally saying, it's not the way of the world to have kavanah, to fulfill the obligation of the positive commandment in remembering the kiddush in the tefillah. Nobody does it. Why? When you're davening Shemoneh Esrei, you think to yourself, okay, I'm fulfilling the mitzvot, aseh, shel, doraita, shel, kiddush. No, you're not doing it. Good, that's the problem. And if you're not doing it, how can this boy take you out now? If he's according to the Mishnah Berurah, if he's on a rabbinical level, but now you're no longer on a rabbinical level by the kiddush, now you're on a doraita level, how he's going to take you out? That's what the Mishnah Berurah is going to also tell you, that you can't do this. Nevertheless, continues the Mishnah Berurah and he tells you, Kevan sheyesh lo yain opat, since the person has wine and bread, v'yachol lekadosh alehem achar kach bebracha kidin, and you're able to go ahead and you're able to do kiddush on them afterwards with the bracha like the halacha requires you. V'tov yoter sheyitzeh az hamitzvot aseh deoraita, it's better then that you go ahead and you fulfill the positive commandment of the Torah of remembering Shabbat, of the kiddush and the cup of wine, then to go ahead and fulfill your obligation in the kiddush of the Aravit prayer, that you're going to be without a cup and without being in the place of the meal. Yeah, you're right. Even though you could go ahead and fulfill it in the Shemoneh Esrei of Aravit, nevertheless, it's better to do it on the cup of wine. But the bottom line of here is, Rabotai, who tells you that person has that kavanah? He says, Ain. Oh, so I wrote over here, Rabotai, Ain ba'amudei hora'ah. Now we have to go see the amudei hora'ah. Let's see what the amudei hora'ah says about this. Let me see over here. Yes. when he says over here that we have a lot of questions on this whole thing, that how can you tell me that the father, yeah, you're right, he went ahead and he said that tefillah of Aravit, you're right. But who said he had kavanah? Who said he had a positive commandment? No, who said he had kavanah to fulfill his obligation for this positive commandment to remember the Shabbat? Who told you that? Maybe he didn't have, because a lot of people don't have kavanah when they do it. So if that is the case, so now he's on a Doraita level, he's on a biblical level, and the child's on a rabbinical level. So how you want the child to fulfill his obligation? So comes Amot Rav Dahan Shlita, and he says, "V'chen mitzadeh b'shut Yabi Omer." So to Chacham Ovadia Yosef, and the Shut Yabi Omer, he also sided with the Mishnah Berurah, with the Chavetz Chaim. Shenire yoter lahalacha. It seems more when it comes to the halacha, the proper way to do the halacha. She'en yotzei yidei chovat kiddush min haTorah b'tefillah. That a person does not fulfill his obligation from the Torah in the Shemona Esrei prayer. You don't. V'heni yichmir beBen Ish Chai. And so to the Ben Ish Chai was machmir, that you don't fulfill the obligation of saying the kiddush in the Shemona Esrei of Aravit. Kevan she'enu al hayayin, since it's not on the wine. V'gam lo kiven letzet bazeh. And plus you did not have any kavanah to go ahead and fulfill your obligation in it. Amnam, however, that's in Shut Yabi Omer. However, nevertheless, continues Rabbi Dahan, and he says, if you look into Halichot Olam, Pasak di min haTorah adam yotzei yidei chovat kiddush b'tefillah. So in Shut Yabi Omer, Chacham Ovadia says you don't fulfill your obligation in the Shemona Esrei prayer of Aravit for the kiddush. You don't fulfill. Nevertheless, in Halichot Olam, he says you do fulfill your obligation in the Aravit prayer from the Torah. Again, you have to have also kavanah. Right? So he says over here, and so too is the opinion of the Or L'Tzion. And so too the Kaf HaChaim also made the Pesach Halacha that you do fulfill your obligation of kiddush from the Torah in the Shemona Esrei of Aravit. בחזון עובדיה שמח בכמה דוכתי עד סברת המגן אברהם. And so too, in Chazon Ovadia, Rabbi Chacham Ovadia, he relied in many places on the opinion of the Magen Avraham, that you do fulfill your obligation of saying kiddush in the Shemona Esrei of Aravit, or befrat besafek berachot, or b'makom tzorach, especially if there's a need for you to fulfill your obligation. We can tell you fulfilled your obligation, or if you have a safek beracha, like in our case, you don't know if you said the kiddush or not, we're going to tell you fulfilled your obligation from the Torah. Anyway, so that's what we're seeing over here, right? This is again. So let's just go back over here. Let me just do this one more time, Rabotai, without the Amodei Hora'ah. So let's go one more time. Here. V'tov yoter sheyitzeh az hamitzvot aseh. It's better that you go ahead and then fulfill the positive commandment of the kiddush from the Torah, mishiyatzeh ata, then going and fulfill your obligation in the Shemona Esrei, that where you're going to be without a cup and where you're going to be also not in the place of the meal. So that's what comes the Chavetz Chaim, all he's telling you over here, that even though you went ahead and you're down with Aravit, fine. But who says you had kavanah? So if you have an option to go ahead and fulfill the mitzvah the best possible way, should you do it in the Shemona Esrei of the tefillah of Aravit, or should you do it on the cup of wine? Comes the Mishnah Berurah, and also Chacham Ovadia, everybody agrees that you should really do it where? On the cup of wine. You fulfill everybody's opinion like this. Furthermore, he said there are many other reasons here. There's also other reasons that you could go ahead and you can question this, like I explained in the Halacha Berurah. Bottom line over here, what is the Mishnah Berurah telling us? That there's a lot of questions that can be asked on this case with the child trying to fulfill the kiddush of a gadol. Alken, therefore, yesh limnoa miletzed yidei kiddush al yidei katan. Therefore, it's in the blue Rabotai. 1 second. Therefore, a person should refrain from fulfilling his obligation for kiddush through a child. Even if the one that is listening is going to say every single word with the child, Gam ken nachon lemno mizeh. Also, it's correct for you to stay away from this practice. Im lo shemunach lefanav gam ken pat or yain be'et kiddush. Unless you have in front of him bread or wine at the time when he's doing the kiddush, then he could go word for word with the child. But otherwise, we're going to tell you that the gadol should go ahead and fulfill his own obligation, and everybody else's, of course. But to have a child fulfill the obligation of a gadol, that we're not going to give you, as we explained the reasons above. Like it says later on, and later on towards the end of Sivkat and Gimel. Now we're learning another piece. Veda, he says you should know. The kiddush shel Yom Tov hu midrabanan. Comes the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah tells us that the kiddush of Yom Tov is only from the rabbis. Because remember, meaning on Yom Tov night. And we know on Friday and the Shabbat, we learn the kiddush right as midoraita. But the kiddush of Yom Tov is telling you midrabanan. If you guys pay attention to that, I wrote in the bolded letters in black with underline. Ve'ain amudei hora'ah. I wrote over there, look into the amudei hora'ah. Let's go look into the amudei hora'ah. Let me just see which ot this is. In ot vav, the kiddush of Yom Tov is from the rabbis. V'chen naktu ben Ish Chai v'Kav HaChaim she kiddush Yom Tov hu midivrei sofrim. The Kav HaChaim and the Ben Ish Chai, they also agree with the Mishnah Berurah, with the Chavetz Chaim, that it is only from the rabbis. Amnam, however, b'chazon Ovadia, however, in Chazon Ovadia, Chacham Ovadia, Pasak, he made a Pasak Halacha, she kiddush shel Leil Yom Tov hu minat Torah. No, he says the kiddush on the night of Yom Tov, that's from the Torah. V'chen hakad ben Ish Chai atzmo b'sivro lashon chachim, and also the Ben Ish Chai himself in his several lashon chachimim also made a Pasak like that. V'lachen, therefore he says, k'shechal Yom Tov be'erev Shabbat. Therefore, when Yom Tov falls out on Erev Shabbat, we'll also see that in the Mishnah Berurah in a second. Ve'elo elo kos echad shel Yom Tov kodem. 1 second. V'lechen kishachal Yom Tov be'erev Shabbat. So therefore, if Yom Tov falls out on Erev Shabbat, on Thursday night, ve'elo elo kos echad shel Yom Tov kodem. I don't know why he read over kodem. Just give me 1 second. Let me just see something over here. 1 second. ולכן כשחל יום טוב בערב שבת ואין לו אלא כוס אחד של יום טוב קודם ובפרט שאין להעביר על המצוות אפילו במצוות. Okay. Rabbi, I think he's saying like this. We have to just put a comma over here. Okay, we're going to like this. He says like this. ולכן, therefore, כשחל יום טוב בערב שבת, if Yom Tov falls out on Erev Shabbat, if Yom Tov falls out on Thursday night, ואין לו כוס אחד, and you only have 1 cup, comma, let's put a comma right over there, shel Yom Tov kodem, that's how you have to read it. Yom Tov precedes it, according to Chacham Vadi, consensus in Torah, ובפרט שאין להעביר על המצוות, אפילו ממצווה קלה לחמורה, especially where you're not allowed to pass over mitzvot, even from something which is very light, to a more stronger mitzvah. Okay, now, Rabotai, and I'll tell you why this, I should have done this first, but let's do this one more time. So let's just take away the word v'ayin od, because now we know that. Let me just take this away. Just like to read it through and through, it's beautiful. V'da, the Mishnah Berurah says, the kiddush of Yom Tov hu midrabanan. The kiddush of Yom Tov is midrabanan. Umekol makom, nevertheless, yesh lo kol din kiddush shel Shabbat. Nevertheless, it has all the laws of kiddush of Shabbat. V'im Yom Tov. Okay, basically, what are we saying that? Yeah, Yom Tov is midrabanan, but we're going to treat it as the kiddush that we do on Shabbat, on Friday night. V'im Yom Tov, here we go. V'im Yom Tov chal be'erev Shabbat. If Yom Tov falls out on Erev Shabbat, ve'en lo elo kos echad, and you only have 1 cup of wine, manichol leShabbat shehu min Torah. Leave the cup for the Shabbat, because the kiddush of Shabbat is from the Torah. U'b'Yom Tov yikadesh al pat. On Yom Tov, you're going to do the kiddush on the bread. Now, Rabotai, that's according to Ashkenazim. According to the Sephardim, we're going to tell you no. Do the kiddush and the cup of wine on Yom Tov, because they hold, Chacham Ovadia says, that Yom Tov is also from the Torah. And on Shabbat, if you have no other wine, you're going to do it on bread. Now, how are you going to do it on bread? Wow, Rabotai, I'm telling you right now, this is Siyata D'Shemaya. I'm really pushing it right now. I'm really behind. because I have a lecture that I have to do right now after this on Google time and the time, and I didn't prepare yet. So let me just try to finish this really quick. Okay. Rabotai, when you say right over here, when you have the Yom HaShishi, right? And then you have the Savri Maranan, you have a Ribri Pregefen, and then you have the Brach of the Kiddush. You have to know that if you don't ever have a cup of wine, not on Saturday morning, on Friday night. On Friday night, if you don't have a cup of wine, you cannot do it on beer. Saturday morning, if you don't have a cup of wine, you do it on beer, no problem. But Friday night is more severe. You're going to do Yom HaShishi, Friday night, because remember, what are we dealing with? Yom Tov fell out on Thursday night. Shabbat is Friday night. Since, according to the Sephardim, both of them are Mina Torah, and we don't want to pass over mitzvot, we're going to tell you, on Yom Tov, since you only have one cup of wine, do the kiddush of Yom Tov on the cup of wine. And on Shabbat, you're going to do it on the bread. How are you going to do it? Very simple. You're going to wash your hands prior to beginning the kiddush. Like usual, washing 3 times on one hand, then washing 3 times on another hand. After you finish, you say, the bracha Baruch Ata Hashem Elokeinu melech olam asher kiddishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al nitzelat yadayim. After you finish, you sit down. Now you stand. You say Yom HaShishi v'Eichul, etc. You get to Savri Maranan. Instead of saying the Borei Pri Given bracha, you're going to take the bread. You're going to hold the bread while you're doing all this. You're going to be having the bread in your hand. You're going to say Baruch Ata Hashem Elokeinu melech olam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. You're not breaking the bread. Then you're going to say Asher. Then you're going to say this bracha again, the kiddush bracha. After you get to Baruch Ata Hashem Kiddush Shabbat, then you could go ahead and break your bread or cut your bread and eat it. That's how you're going to go ahead and do kiddush on Friday night. Okay, Rabotai, that is according to the Sephar. According to the Ashkenazim, you're going to do the same thing, just opposite. According to the Ashkenazim, since Yom Tov is D'Rabbanan, we're going to tell you, according to them, you have to do the kiddush of Yom Tov on the bread. Same thing, same, whatever the text is going to be, same thing. Just substitute the Borei Pri given blessing with Hamotzi. And on Friday, according to Ashkenaz, you're going to go ahead and do the cup. You're going to do the kiddush on the cup of wine, because that's what the whole is Midoraita. But by us, it's just the other way around. Fine. Rabotai, with this we do conclude the Hebrew version. Now, let me go ahead, let me just read this in English so we guys can have it. Here we go. Okay. If you are not sure if you said Shema on time in Shul, it's good to say Shema right away to be safe, but not obligated, right? We saw that halacha. If a person went ahead, you're not sure if you said the Shema in its proper time, no problem. Meaning, before when the stars came out, you're allowed to go ahead, you're allowed to do kiddush, you're allowed to have your meal, no problem, you're not obligated to say Shema. Nevertheless, Rabotai, it's better to say it right away, but if you didn't, fine, but whatever it is, make sure you get to say it after once the stars come out. Right, we said, see earlier in the Mishnah in Siman 267 in Halacha 6, in Sivkat 6, 1 second. The Rambam writes in Hilchot Shabbat, in paragraph 29, there is a mitzvah from the Torah to make Shabbat holy with the words. Because the Pasuk says, remember Shabbat to make it holy. This means to speak about Shabbat and make kiddush, which means, not the kiddush like we think, but it means to speak about Shabbat and make it, meaning you should sanctify it. And it should be done with words. Since we know that the sanctification process is only done with words, now we know wine is only from the rabbis, not Torah. Tosfot also says in Sukkah 38 and Nazir 4 that wine is only rabbinic. Magen Avraham explains, from the Torah, just saying kiddush in your prayer is enough. Right? That's what we just explained. That from the Torah, just saying kiddush in your prayer is enough. Because the Torah only says remember Shabbat, and you did that by saying it. So if that is going to be the case, so once we know that, so it's going to come out that kiddush over wine, and kiddush at the meal is only rabbinic, so therefore I'm not really concerned. The Beit Yosef in Siman 269 and the Gemara show you already fulfilled the Torah mitzvah with prayer alone. Like we spoke about it, Rabotai. Now we're moving on to the next piece. What if someone is not sure if he already said kiddush, meaning on the cup of wine? He doesn't need to repeat the kiddush because that is only about a rabbinic mitzvah. And we are lenient with doubt about rabbinic laws. That was the Pri Megadim. The next thing we learned, can a child old enough to be taught mitzvot say kiddush for an adult? Maybe yes, because the adult already prayed and did the Torah mitzvah. However, Rabotai, I wrote this in red, we hold that it is not allowed, and that's going to be the final halacha. It is not allowed, as we went in depth in explaining that law. But like we said, but there is a big problem. We hold that mitzvot need intention to fulfill them. And people usually don't think to remember Shabbat during prayer because they expect to make kiddush later with wine or bread. Therefore, we're going to tell you that the child does not fulfill the obligation of the gadol. It is better to do the Torah mitzvah with the wine or bread later than to count on prayer alone. So the Mishnah Berurah says, do not rely on a child to say kiddush for adults, unless the adult also has bread or wine in front of him when listening. So he's doing a proper kiddush with a meal. Even if the adult says every word together with the child, it's better not to rely on this. Last point but not least, kiddush on Yom Tov. Kiddush on Yom Tov is only rabbinic. However, we did see Chacham Ovadia say that Yom Tov night is from the Torah. But we treat it like kiddush of Shabbat. We're going to give it importance, Rabotai. If Yom Tov is on Friday and you only have 1 cup of wine, save it for Shabbat, since the kiddush from the Torah, and on Yom Tov make kiddush on the bread. Nevertheless, Rabotai, this is all according to the Ashkenazim, according to the Chavetz Chaim. However, we Rabotai are going to hold the Sephardim, since Chacham Ovadia said that Yom Tov is also from the Torah. We're going to tell you to do the kiddush on the cup of wine, and to do the bread, and to do the kiddush of Shabbat on the bread. So on Yom Tov you're going to do it on the wine, and on Shabbat you're going to do it on the bread. Rabotai, if that was too fast, we just went over this, I just went ahead and I read it. We went about explaining all of this. In any event, Rabotai, have a great day. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'amen.